the Eastern Mediterranean, once again for our Wednesday evening talk. And this evening, we're delighted to be welcoming Sister Wendy, who's here from Rome. Wendy, are you here? And can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you and see you.
Okay. There you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Warm welcome to you from hot and humid Istanbul. And you have lovely flowers behind you, but we'd of course like to welcome you with some more. So, here come some flowers heading your way and just coming up on your screen. Here's Sister Ishil. Ishil is presenting these flowers to you.
Beautiful. Lovely.
So welcome. Thank you, Ishil. Thank you. Yeah, so for those who may not know Wendy, although I think everyone knows something about her, came to Baba in 1982 in Paris and opened the first BK Center in Rome in 1984. And she's been serving all over in so many different initiatives over the years. Some background about her life: she was an Olympic skier, dancer, choreographer, and also trained and presented a dolphin show. So there's something that's that you don't see every day. And the topic that we've suggested to her is, funnily enough, Baba mentioned it in the Murli, Avyak Murli, a couple of weeks ago, about making excuses. And sometimes making excuses is described as one of the 10 vices. And so, very straight up topic: stop making excuses and instead start getting results. So what are excuses? Why do we make them? What's the difference between excuses and reasons? So I'm hoping to hear something about all of this. Wendy, just to remind us, simultaneous translation, so to speak fairly slowly. And can you say something to check your volume, please?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it was. I suppose you were referring to that Avyak Murli on honesty, maybe, where Baba. I can't remember where he actually. There you are. You see. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think the volume's fine. And so, yeah, thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. Very nice. So, this stop making excuses and start getting results. When I first read the title and then I read it again and I thought about it and read it again, it was sounding somewhat prescriptive. And I went back. It brought up a memory from my childhood. And this was an interesting experience, actually, because it revealed a lot of things to me that excuses actually basically tend to cover. And it happened when I was about 9 and we moved to France when my father retired. And for some reason, I started biting my nails, which was something I'd never done as a child earlier. And my mother used to get quite upset with me and she'd say, "Stop it," like that. And of course, I would stop when she said it, and it would create a sort of an ill feeling with me, but it actually didn't stop my nail biting. And that stopped many weeks later, months later.
Apologies. Sorry, Wendy. There's a request to go a little slower, please, from the translators.
Okay. And so the nail biting solved itself many weeks later or many months later. when in fact I ceased to be insecure. The move, the changing of countries, the changing of language, the changing of school, the fact I had no friends there anymore, must have had its effect. And the nail biting became a sort of a coping mechanism, put it that way. And it's funny that this memory should come out with this title. But it conditioned a little bit my my churning, my thoughts on the excuses. And I'd never really actually churned excuses up till now. But realizing that there are many, many reasons why we actually do make excuses, and probably the most obvious reason is time. Excuses offers us more time. The one thing that is fixed is time. You know, the clock is very fixed. And time is what Baba indicates, that people will say, you know, you offer them the course, you offer them to come to the center, and they will say, I don't have time. Well, we will all do that at some point or other. When we feel overpowered by events that are happening, and saying that we don't have time sort of gives us space to work. So that's the basic payoff when we actually make the excuse of time, of not having enough time. But on the other hand, there are many other reasons. One of them is, for example, to not create fear or offend someone. And I noticed that this particular excuse is very culturally significant to certain cultures. And certain cultures just find it impolite to say no. And so you will, and of course, if you're not of that culture and you don't know this, it's quite a problem. And so you invite them maybe to a program and they'll say, oh, yes, and they sound enthusiastic. But time and the getting used to a particular culture will indicate to you that they will always say yes. And you have to discover whether it's yes, maybe, or yes, no way. It could be any. And this is something that you have to adapt to within the culture that you're working in. Of course, if you're born into that culture, you would know already. And these are not then challenges. But that is a very typical one. One does it also to avoid offending people. It's easier to say, make an excuse rather than say, you know, I completely forgot your nice invitation. Doesn't sound very respectful. Excuses always has to do with other people in many ways, or it has to do with a preference that I might have. In a certain sense, it's always somehow a lie in a certain sense. Now, there are, I think, excuses, like in England, we say white lies, you know, which are what lies that are culturally, socially acceptable, because that way you don't upset people. Well, I think there are white excuses which are aimed at not getting people upset, or, you know, saving their feelings, making their feelings feel, you know, they feel much better. Then there is also the excuses because we have difficulty in facing the truth. Now, there could be many occasions like that. And I would say that a lot of our Brahmin life is, in that sense, is that in the Brahmin life, at first we have difficulty in facing the negativity, and then we have difficulty in facing what Baba has said, the positivity of it all. And we forget that, God doesn't actually make excuses. He tells you exactly what is happening. And he has said that we are handpicked. We are chosen by him because we are part of the golden age creation. Each one of us is necessary. He said this in a Muri quite recently, he doesn't bother to choose someone if he has to pay someone back for something that he's not interested in, something to that nature. And it's true. Now, we have great difficulty in even imagining that God might have chosen me because this is what I am. And I might think, oh, well, that's the excuse, the wiggle room, we call it in English, the room to wiggle. Oh, well, that may be the daddies, but myself, I don't think so. We have great difficulty in actually accepting that God has seen us in a very, very elevated situation, a very, very elevated condition. Our perfect form is extremely elevated, and we make excuses for our present condition. All of these are very subtle at times, Then there's laziness. When you're lazy, you will make excuses, like, oh, well, I had a heavy day yesterday, and so I don't think I'll get up for Amrit Vela. It's, I need the sleep, that maybe I don't, I'm making the excuse of not reorganizing myself. Then there's the lack of courage. I mean, this is not, that it's not limited to what I'm saying. This is just what came out. The lack of courage, of having that courage to face. And when we don't have the courage to face, we will make an excuse. Then, as I said, there are these cultural habits. There are cultures that prefer not to be absolutely direct, that tend to push everything under the carpet, if you see what I mean. Let's look at it later, sort of thing. And then there's the excuse of, well, I will have time later to look at it. It's an extremely interesting subject, this whole thing of excuses. I think it's actually very, very personal. You can't sort of say, oh, well, everybody's the same, because we're not. We're not the same when it comes to the way we function. And although there would be similarities in the way we function culturally, and we would culturally possibly be more likely to understand people of our culture, it still doesn't mean that there is not that personal factor. Then there is, a question about, am I aware that when you are giving an excuse, it's always a lie somehow. Now, Baba gave this Muli a couple of weeks ago on honesty. And honesty, he has said that the double foreigners are actually very honest. Now, that would mean, and of course, he's obviously right, because he would never say something if it wasn't true like that. We tend to accept more, maybe, what the things really are, what it's really like. Maybe we're not direct, but we at least do give it that idea that we are aware that we don't put things under the carpet, let's say. But to what an extent am I aware that however much I may be honest in accordance with what Baba says, and I'm taking that as a blessing, to what an extent am I really aware of the white lies that are included in any form of making excuses? Now, this thing with time, for example, that's very typical. We all have our own way of handling time, and we will make an excuse if time runs out on us. Now, if time runs out, either I program myself wrong, or I actually gave priority to something that I preferred, which is actually quite typical. We all do prioritize. I myself have done it. I've spent minutes and minutes talking to someone when the conversation was interesting and I was getting fun or benefit from it, and I thought maybe the other person was too. And then, of course, I didn't do the things that I said I was going to do. We all do tend to prioritize, and there again, to what an extent am I balancing the discipline with, being a little bit sort of self-indulgent at times? Now, self-indulgence to a large extent could easily be laziness. I think the one thing that we do have to do is just check it out and keep control over to what an extent I'm willing to pass things up because I prefer doing something else, or to what an extent I've actually got control over what I'm doing. And this is a wider aspect of excuses, because I will always find something to do that I enjoy. And is that becoming an excuse, or am I not organizing myself properly? I was finding this theme actually of excuses extremely interesting, actually, but I must admit that it's not particularly sort of joyful. It's actually quite negative, to be honest. But then maybe it takes, it needs to be looked at, possibly. So, fixing something in the house may not be something that I particularly enjoy, so I will put it off. When they say, sometimes when we look at these things and we see what is said, for example, they said that Mama never made the same mistake twice, and no doubt did everything the moment it needed to be done. And I think both she and Brahma Baba had that instinct that you couldn't waste time, that you couldn't make excuses, that you had to do immediately what needed to be done, which meant that they were really very, very disciplined. They were very disciplined in controlling what they actually accepted to do. And I mean that they did not make excuses if they didn't particularly want to do a thing. They were disciplined enough to do what they maybe were not enjoying that enormously, but it was Baba's service and it was needed and it was useful. And there, to what an extent can I actually become enthusiastic? Because you need to find enthusiasm and positivity to motivate yourself. Otherwise, what's going to motivate you to clean the floor? The floor's dirty. It does need to be cleaned. But how am I going to motivate myself to do that if there are other things that I prefer? And the one way of doing that is to realize just how useful that is for Baba. That is really as useful and as important. And incidentally, what you receive from cleaning the floor is the same return as you receive for giving a talk. So prioritizing things, thinking that Baba will take that more into consideration than me cleaning the floor, is a wrong realization. It's a very human realization. And we get caught out with these sort of things, where we tend to feel that certain things are more upmarket, more elegant, and more important. And then we leave the things that are more, should I say, more humble. When in fact, for Baba, doing either one is, he will pay the same salary, let's put it that way. You know, he has the same attitude towards one or the other. There are no high-paid workers and low-paid workers in Baba's family, luckily. He has immense love for all of us. And so this lack of discipline, where we don't realize, then of course, you know, there are moments when circumstances change.
Sorry, Wendy, an interruption again. Going to request to slow down a bit, please.
Okay. The circumstances can change. Like, it's not an excuse, you are ill. You are actually ill and you can't do a program or whatever. You've actually called the doctor. So that is not an excuse, that is a reality. And sometimes we get confused in just how well we need to look after our bodies, and when it would be necessary to back away. In my years in Gyan, I've heard Baba speak both to Jagdish and to Daddy Janki, warning them that they're pushing it too much. He doesn't mean for us to drive ourselves to our death. That's not what he wants. He wants us to be mature and honest and not push ourselves beyond certain limits. If you're ill, you should opt out, as we say in English, and give precedence to your karmic situation with your body, obviously. Then there are other situations that could be, like, say, more permanent. Like, for example, I could say, well, I'm 81 now, and I cannot carry this suitcase up these stairs. That's not an excuse. 20 years ago, it would have been, 20 years ago, it would have been an excuse. But now, it wouldn't be. It would be a truth. So we then have to reassess our whole feelings of what it would mean to actually make excuses. Then also, we have to find a rhythm in the motivation of our effort. Because I'll tell you what, is using the whip is not the right way for Baba. It's not the right way for Baba's children either. If you force yourself, you're very harsh with yourself. It doesn't make for a happy, joyful Brahmin. And this needs to be looked at, because in Lokik life, if you force yourself, people applaud. Maybe certain people applaud in Gyan too, but it's not really the way Baba wants us to behave. So we have to find a balance between what I would call stern talk, being disciplined with the self, and allowing ourselves more freedom to do what we feel we need to do or want to do. And of course, important, we shouldn't be comparing, and we shouldn't be competing. comparing and competing are two very, very human things that are just not beneficial for a Brahmin future, when you realize that Baba says we are all unique, so comparing is useless. Competing is doubly useless, because it would have no meaning if we're really all unique. And so also, with all of that, I might say to myself, what result would I be content with? What is the result I want? What is the result I'm looking for? Now, question, am I aware of my potential? Do I see what Baba sees in me? Now, the chances are you don't. I mean, I certainly don't. I mean, it has at times, by certain senior Brahmins, I've been reminded of this, but I've always sort of said, oh, not likely. And I was pretty blunt with it too. I didn't believe, what they were saying. I didn't believe Baba either. I thought, if I make superhuman effort, he might have a consideration for me. Now, that is a very devotional sanskar. You always hope that God will be impressed and consequently will love you because you're making superhuman efforts. And that's not the way it is, because actually Baba does love you. He doesn't love you because you're doing Amrit Vela. He loves you, full stop. This is difficult to comprehend. Also, back on the idea of these deeper sanskars, I call them the deeper sanskars. There's never been really given an enormous amount of definition about those deep-rooted sanskars that are so difficult to control. Well, I looked at that and thought, these are things that do make us make excuses. And what is it? These deep-rooted sanskars are sanskars that we created when, probably as a child, or younger, or maybe at school, you were either bullied or shamed in some way, or abused, or rejected. And these are all things that happen typically. They either happen within your family or they will happen within your time at school. And we create sanskars to protect ourselves. Now, these sanskars, which I consider part of the deeper rooted sanskars, are actually difficult to remove. And they've become so much part of what I am that you don't think of removing them that much. And also, they have protected you, so they seem to be extremely useful. I'll give you an example, because maybe there would be many examples, but like, for example, if you have been rejected as a child for whatever reason, if someone rejects you now, when you're an adult, there will still be a response to that. You will feel pain in some way. Now, pain could stimulate you to use a sanskar of aggression or withdrawal, refusing to work with that person, or having difficulty working with that person. It's not the person, it's your response to what they're doing. And they maybe are doing what they're doing because it's part of their deep-rooted sanskars. Now, all of this should be making a lot of sense when it comes to having an easy life with Brahmins. Brahmins are not always that easy to live with because they tend to press your buttons, and it's what we call that is they will re-stimulate a past pain. Now, you need to get rid of this, and it's not that easy. But literally, the only way that you can is by accepting the unconditional love that Baba is offering. He is offering. There's no condition. There is no, oh yes, I'll love you if you do service, if you do this. No, he will love you then. If you do get up for Amrit Vela, he will be thrilled to talk to you, and you will take benefit from that. The benefit is all yours. But he's not going to stop loving you if you don't. Now, the thing is that within the human soul, there is that feeling that we need to deserve love. And in many ways, you can't receive love unless to a certain extent you are going towards that person with love. And we have that feeling of maybe of being ashamed. This is why for me anyway, one of the best ways of maintaining our self-respect in this sort of situation is to follow Srimat accurately. You then can't blame yourself. You can't say, oh, well, it was my fault, because that's an excuse too. Our actual lack of forward movement, we will blame on ourselves in many ways. And we will then actually make excuses for outside circumstances. That's where the excuse will come in. Now, if you're accurate with this, you're accurate doing exactly what Baba wants, somewhere along the line you have deserved your love, his love. Now, it's very difficult for a body conscious person to feel close to God. In my days of bhakti, I was brought up in a Catholic convent, you would, if there was something you needed, you'd light a candle. I mean, there are candles in all the churches in Rome. If you wanted a blessing, you'd light a candle, and you'd light the candle with this feeling, well, God is so far away up there, I'm down here in the human world. That's a very body conscious concept, of course, and we have that. But lighting a candle with that sort of an attitude is not going to really give you that love and comfort you need. If you step up your soul conscious efforts, you will find that it's much, much easier to feel very close to God, to the Supreme Soul, if you are really soul conscious. If you are really soul conscious, he doesn't leave the room that you're in. That is already a physical consciousness. You can't even say, oh, well, when this was happening, Baba went next door. If you're soul conscious, he's there. And this is something that is extremely complicated to really realize. Just how much that distance disappears. And so you have to really, really realize that it's all up to us. He doesn't withdraw any part of the love. He continues to have the love. And then what we make of it is up to us. And as I'm saying, excuses always have to do with the other person, and how the other person might feel. So, we can think about honesty and being totally, I mean, we can be totally honest with Baba, and he won't mind. I mean, you can say, I didn't feel like getting up from Arit Vela this morning because I was cross. Well, maybe you were, you know, maybe you needed that time out to breathe before you started challenging your anger. That's okay. Just don't think he's not with you on that. This is why I'm saying that Baba can get to the deepest sanskars, the ones that protected you, because you would not trust a human being with that. You can trust him. And you can trust him in the fact that you're not a child anymore, and you actually don't need those protections anymore. So he can really help you in this. And he is probably the only one who can, because I know people who have done psychological, they've been to psychologists for years and years and years to sort these things out. And it's a very long journey. Suffice, should I say, it's enough just to know that these sort of things exist and not be surprised at what you've actually experienced. Like what I said with my biting my nails as a small child. I never thought of that till I started churning this. There was a reason why I didn't know. It was a deeper reason. And there are many things that we do that with problems that we can't face. We'll make an excuse if we can't face something. Why is it that we can't face it? If it's something that, you know, Baba says, for example, that destruction is going to be difficult to face. And what happens if I have difficulty with that? Now, I'm going to have to learn to not run away and make an excuse. These are all things that maybe I'm going into it too deeply. I don't know. It's what just came out. And one beautiful thing about that I've experienced in understanding what's going on is that when other people, for no particular reason that you can understand, will aggress or react violently or very negatively or whatever, if you are aware that probably you've pressed a button or two from the past and had re-emerged something that they went through, if you understand that and you yourself have been through it, your tolerance, the peaceful attitude that you will have will help them in their transformation. Because, you know, we talk about unity, we talk about family. Running away from each other when we're pressing each other's buttons is not going to solve the problem. We need to be aware of our own buttons, what stimulates me to react, maybe negatively, and accept that other people have buttons too, which I may be pressing without knowing it. And this is something that this is where tolerance becomes extremely, extremely useful. And it helps them in their transformation. So then I thought about, you know, getting the results, and to start getting results, you know, what sort of results am I expecting? What am I expecting? Medals, applause, or, you know, thinking of it. In the Murli tomorrow, pay attention to the Murli tomorrow, because I started preparing it. You know, he says at a certain point, and when we think of becoming Bap Samam, you know, he says, I don't think I don't do anything. Well, I think that the closer we get to our karmatit stage, the more life becomes peaceful. The less is actually happening in our minds. And I was thinking, would I actually recognize that I'm achieving something and that is a positive result, or would I actually get bored because I'm not having this stimulating effect that I was maybe, so used to? So that was a very amusing thought. But I felt that, just being aware that Baba knows underneath all of these excuses, deep-rooted sanskars and that, he sees the perfect me that will illuminate the golden age in some way. And I don't really know what way I might be illuminating the golden age. And all of that will happen when I become pure. So the process really, basically, the aim, I was thinking what result, is the result that I would really like is to make sure that I allow Baba to purify me. Whatever else I will realize probably through the purification process, because the purer I become, the clearer things will be for me. And so say to myself, am I really helping him in purifying me? I mean, am I cooperating, let's say? These are things I could be asking myself. And then another thing that I might ask myself is, am I thinking of enlarging my circle of love? Is that actually happening? Are there always more people that I can accept, feel easy with, that I can actually love? Or am I having difficulty with that? Because at the Golden Age, there is an exchange of love with every human being, with every animal that there is. Everything mirrors back love to you. And to what an extent have I got there yet now? And what am I doing to allow that to happen? And so I found it quite interesting to even understand what results I really am expecting or want. And with all the excuses that we do make for one reason or another, just how much balance I've created in all that. So I suppose I had a cultural reaction to the theme in the way it was actually put. It was sort of like, get on with it kind of thing, like my mother, stop it, as if it was just that easy. And I suppose everything that I thought about was actually an excuse. An excuse to say, well, I would like to, but, there's a lot of stuff here that I need to look at. So there we are. If that's not made more confusion.
Thanks, Wendy. That raised some very interesting points. I'd like to ask everyone, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box. Meantime, as usual, I'll start off with one. So I have found that the beginning of any real meaningful spiritual progress happens when you are honest with yourself. So if I am not really working on a particular sanskar and I'm making excuses to avoid doing that, what does it take to reach that point where I'm ready to say, I no longer want to make excuses to my own self. This has nothing to do with anybody else. I honestly now want to transform this. No excuses, no, justifying any tendencies or attachments. How do you get to that point where you really say, I'm ready to work on this. I want to finish this sanskar now?
I think you need to make sure that your stage is good. Create a good stage, like say, work on that spiritual side of you before you take up that kind of a challenge. Don't take up that challenge when you're feeling down, when you're feeling exhausted, when you're feeling completely overcome by circumstances or whatever. That's not the moment to do it. So you have to prepare for it. And I don't know, characters are different, but if you prepare for it and know it's going to happen, but you're leaving yourself time to create a stage where you feel you can face it, then I think you have a good chance of putting it through.
Okay. There's a question that's come directly to me. Let me try and summarize this. What to do when a teacher, BK teacher, is, I think, rejecting, manipulating, and my avoidance is because of not accepting harm anymore to improve my self-love and self-respect. Because earlier I behaved like I was a dustbin.
Well, yeah. When we first come into Gyan, don't forget, we are the greatest devotees of the whole world. We have done the most devotion. So we have these devotional sanskars. And the devotional sanskar will think, well, I will obey. I won't try and understand, I will just obey. And if I do what this person wants, things will be okay for me. Well, that's a devotional feeling and a devotional attitude or awareness that actually doesn't really work for Baba. A lot of people, this particular, whoever it was that made that question, is not alone in this. I've heard people admit that they have been, out and out abused in the Brahmin family. We have to face it. The Brahmin family can be as dysfunctional as any Lokic family. That's my experience. They've got a lot of good. There is God speaking to us, but our human sanskars are still there. And whoever you may be, on all levels. And so I think that one needs to realize just the hierarchy is just for organization purposes. And it giving respect to someone who's been there for years is a good idea. But it doesn't mean to say that you've got to swallow everything that they give you. And that means self-respect. You can agree to disagree over certain things. And this is part of your, each one of us, I say your mind too, it's part of our evolution. You have to learn to come into your self-respect and keep your head up and not bow your head. Keep your head up in front of God. Whether you bow your head in front of human beings because it's the right thing to do at that time, because it makes things, it's a good excuse. It's right at that time because they wouldn't understand. But it doesn't mean to say that you bow down yourself. You're no dustbin. And the first person who's going to have to realize that is you. Because if you're an open dustbin, people are going to throw trash into it. It's too useful. Yeah. You need a good sense of humor with all of this.
This is true. Humor is an essential part of life in general, but the spiritual life especially.
Definitely.
So here's a question. How do I know if I am somehow sustaining my own weaknesses whilst at the same time telling myself it takes time to transform? Am I fooling myself?
Well, you possibly are. Probably you are. But on the other hand, we all are moving forward at our own speed. And you can't do more than one thing at a time, possibly. We all have different speeds. We can't compare. Some people go extremely fast in certain areas and not in others. They might go very fast in one way, but then they may have a lot of attachment and they have difficulties in that sense. So I think we need to be very thoughtful and very human with ourselves, but just say to ourselves, what result do I want? Because if I want a good result, just making excuses or not doing it is not going to get those results. I have to find a way of motivating myself. What would it feel like to actually have achieved that? And you will, if you think about it, you can meditate over it, and then you will get a feeling. But that would be so wonderful to feel that way, to feel absolutely peaceful when people address you, to feel merciful when people are doing this, when you actually can understand what might be happening for them. And whether you know it or not, it's not important. But you know that there is a need to have respect for other people's movement. Now, you can say that for yourself too. I think we can be very willful with ourselves, and really have that sort of very strong fist, But as I said, a whip is not a good idea because it creates more pain. And you need to motivate yourself with goodwill and love and that kind of thing. And it's not the given way in the world today. So you have to find that, a lot of goodwill and love for yourself. And if you love yourself, if you love someone, you want the best for them. And I think if we love ourselves, we don't block ourselves. The time will come, the right moment to actually change will happen. And we can also do things to help us get to that point where the switch can actually happen. There's a lot of preparation in a lot of these things, You have to let go of it. You have to not recognize it anymore as being part of you. Each one has to really, you have to know yourself. Some people will work very well if there's someone behind them going, you must do this, you must do that. But what happens if that person disappears? It's a dependency in a certain sense. You've got to be accepting of yourself and make your own plan for your own speed of effort.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. There's another question. If excuses come from deep sanskars, then the result of excuses have benefited me. They can bring an experience of peace, detachment, etc. These experiences might be considered as good and pure, not recognizing where it comes from. So the question, what is needed to become aware that some feelings come from an escapism?
Well, like what I'm saying, well, like I was saying before, if we have a specific form of excuse, and most older Brahmins who have been in Gyan for a while are probably aware of the particular wound, would I say, the wound in the soul, the hole in the soul, that excuse has been covering, that excuse has brought benefit for. This is why they're very difficult to give up. Because you have to fill the hole, you see. You have to heal the wound. And all of these things that I was saying, like, being bullied or being rejected or all of that, these kind of abuse things that go on in the world today, very few people don't have something around that nature, a little bit more for certain people, a little bit less for others. But most families or most people experience, the bullying that goes on in schools is absolutely frightening. Children are very, very unkind to each other. And this can remain with you for many, many years. And of course, any sanskar that you develop to alleviate the pain is a sanskar that's protection. My sanskar, when I was a child, because I was a strong child, and my father had taught me to defend myself, though he didn't mean it that way. If anybody started abusing me, I'd beat the hell out of them. And I mean that physically. I'm being honest, and it worked. Of course it did. For a child, it would work. I now know that I can't do that, which leaves me at times very frustrated. But doing bad for bad received is not the way to it. We do need to develop an enormous amount of goodwill, blessings, good feelings for other people who are trying to maybe do us harm. And very often they don't know they're doing it. They're not aware of it. They don't know what they're doing to us because they don't know our past. And we don't talk about it in Gyan. If you have a particularly good friend who you trust and you're living with them, it is not a bad idea to maybe say, as a child, I was shamed for this. And so anything that comes within that is likely to create pain and reaction, etc. But the best thing is anyway to look at what Baba's creating in the new you. Now, there's not going to be a trace of any of that negativity that we're going to have to protect by some excuse at the golden age. And he's willing to be there. I think one of the reasons why Baba created a new family for us, this is a new family, is because it would put us through a different training. He, being the father, will allow us to be totally secure in what he's doing. But of course, you've got to be good and soul conscious and close to him. You've got to, stimulate the yoga. And then you will feel more secure with him. And then other people can be negative with you, and it doesn't really matter that much. They're going through their own stuff, and you have goodwill for them.
Okay, one final question, maybe just a quick answer to this as we're running out of time. You mentioned about Baba chooses me, Baba chooses us. So if Baba chooses someone and that person then drifts away, did Baba make a bad choice?
No. I believe that all of that is just what we see superficially. Baba never makes bad choices. I think we believe that someone is a Brahmin when he's sitting in Murli or he's doing Amrit Vela or whatever. There are a lot of people that are not in Murli and that are not doing Amrit Vela right now because of these issues that we're talking about, you know. But the purification process towards the end will mean that all of that will disappear anyway. Either you're aware of it or you're not, but it will disappear. And whatever Baba saw in you will emerge. The only thing is that you may not have had that much of a participation in becoming what you really would like to become. He gives you a choice. And of course, if you are not around, you're not making those choices for yourself. But it doesn't mean to say that Baba made mistakes. I don't think he does. I don't think any Brahmin ever really disappears, but some Brahmins go into a smoke screen where you can't see them anymore. It doesn't mean to say they're not there. You know, Baba says at times they'll all come back. And there, what's my attitude towards these people that come back? Do I see them with that vision that Baba has? Oh, you know, the prodigal child has come back, thank goodness. The golden age can get moving now. Or do I behave in a way that is rather critical? Because you don't want to hurt again someone that has been hurt already. I mean, people leave Gyan because of these sort of issues where they don't feel they were understood. And they've understood human beings, but they've not made the effort to understand.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to wrap up there. There are a few comments in the box. I haven't read the comments, just the questions, but some beautiful comments coming through. So yes, appreciation, Wendy, from all of us. And as usual, we'd like to invite you all to come into gallery view so Wendy can see your shining and smiling faces.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see us, Wendy?
Yeah, I've put the gallery on.
Yeah,
yeah, it's lovely. Yeah.